Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the National Civil Rights Museum's Book and Author Talk. For those of you who are new to the National Civil Rights Museum, we are located in Memphis, Tennessee, at the historic Lorraine Motel. Now, this evening, we are tremendously excited for our book talk. My name is Dr. Noelle Trent. I'm the Director of Interpretation, Collections, and Education. And tonight we have the wonderful author of The Watsons Go to Birmingham, Mr. Christopher Paul Curtis, and an author you may have been very familiar with, Jason Reynolds. And they're going to talk about the 25th anniversary of The Watsons Go to Birmingham. So just a little bit of information on our guest tonight. Christopher Paul Curtis has won the Newbery Medal and the Coretta Scott King Award for his best-selling second novel, Bud Not Buddy. His first novel, The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963, was also singled out for many awards and has been a bestseller in hardcover and paperback. He has a number of other books, including The Mighty Miss Malone, Mr. Chickie's Messy Mission, and Mr. Chickie's Funny Money, and Bucking the Sarge. He was born and raised in Flint, Michigan, and lives with his family in Windsor, Ontario. Now, our second guest this evening is Mr. Jason Reynolds, who is a New York Times bestselling author of All American Boys, the Track series, Long Way Down, For Everyone, and Miles Morales' Spider-Man. He's an American author who writes novels and poetry for young adult and middle grade audiences, including Ghost, a National Book Award finalist for young people's literature. Now, what's special about tonight is that we are actually doing something the museum rarely gets to do, which is celebrating the launch of a special edition of a book. So there's, for the Watsons Go to Birmingham 25th anniversary edition, not only did they do a special reprinting of the novel, but they've also had other authors talk about the book, its impact and significance to them, how it inspired them as writers. And so we're so honored that Jason Reynolds, who was one of those contributors to those essays, is going to moderate the conversation tonight. Now, for those of you in our attendees, we're going to ask that you put your questions in the Q&A as they come up. There will be an opportunity for us to get to those questions. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. Also, the book is available for purchase at the museum, at our museum store, and we'll be posting the link to that in the chat throughout the evening. But you know what? It's enough from me. So let's give a warm welcome to Christopher Paul Curtis and Jason Reynolds. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Much. What an honor to be here.
Yeah,
Great
man.
to have you.
All right. This is what we doing, man. You know what? I'm gonna give you my flowers first. Let me just take a moment to say the things I need to say to you before I start asking you questions. What most people who are in the audience don't know is that we never had a chance to talk, right? And so we, even though I remember when I first sort of came onto the scene, it was your name. It was kind of like, oh, Christopher Paul Curtis. There was somebody came up to me once and said, "Are you Christopher Paul Curtis?" I was like, "Nah." and I was standing next to Kwame. I was standing next to Kwame Alexander. And so after I said no, they turned to Kwame and said, "Are you Christopher Paul?" This is a true story. They said, "Are you Christopher Paul Curtis?" Neither of us are Christopher Paul Curtis.
You should have said one, way too much hair. Two, Kwame's way too tall. So to be
I was like, we both wish we were Christopher Paul Curtis, but I'm actually Walter D. Myers. But I want to say, man, all jokes aside, it could be said that I don't get to sit here without you. It could be said that there are a lot of us who get to sort of stand in your shadow, man, and who get to, your generation, your era, really sort of paved the way for so many of us to continue on this work and to continue to make this work fearlessly and courageously and lovingly. And so I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you. I really genuinely mean, you never know who's coming up after you. You never know who's sort of on your coattails trying to figure out a way to do the thing that you're doing, and to honor you by doing it to the best of their abilities. And a lot of us have sort of stepped into that space to say, like, man, if it weren't for a Christopher Paul Curtis, if it weren't for Jacqueline Woodson, if it weren't for Walter D. Myers, if it weren't for these people, all of which are your contemporaries, I don't know where we would be. I don't know if there would be a We Need Diverse Books. I don't know if there would be all of these sort of new movements that your generation seeded years ago. The other thing I want to talk about, though, is that I know we're here to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Watsons Go to Birmingham 1963, which is a part of the title, everybody. It never gets said, but it's a part of the title. The Watsons Go to Birmingham 1963. I want to hear your origin story. I really want to. I want this to be a moment for you and I. Honestly, I just want to ask all these questions that I haven't just been able to ask because we haven't been able to talk. I know a lot about you because I typically tend to study my OGs and figure out what lineage I'm coming through. And what I'm realizing is you and Walter and Walter Mosley, who I spoke to last week, and a lot of us who sort of get into this game, specifically Black men, seem to always come through the back door. Like our pathway into this always feels a little different. And so I guess I want you to just tell me a little bit about where you come from and about how you got here. Because I know it was very different than how a lot of people get into this industry.
Very different. Well, first of all, thank you so much. That what you said touches my heart, and it's a lot like when I speak to students, and sometimes you got some rowdy kids and all, and I just keep going on, and I say to myself, if I can reach one of them, then I've done something. And to hear something from someone as accomplished as you are saying something like that, it really touches me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. My journey started in Flint, Michigan. I lived in an all-Black neighborhood. We hear a lot about segregation in the South, and everybody thinks segregation is in the South. The most segregation, the biggest segregated cities are in the North. Cleveland, Detroit, Flint, all these cities. Yep, all of them. Those are the most segregated cities that there are. I grew up in Flint, and there's bad connotations to segregation, but there's some good ones too, because one of the things that that happened was all the professionals that I saw through my parents, 90% of my teachers, the doctors, the lawyers, everybody that we dealt with were Black. So it was always a possibility to me that I could do these things too. And so I lived in Flint. One of the things about Flint, one of the rituals that you have to go through almost is working in the car factory. And so in 1971, after I graduated from high school, I told my parents I was not going to go to college, or I was going to go to college part-time, but I wanted to make some money. I wanted a car, I wanted an apartment, I wanted all these things. And my mother told me, don't do it because you'll get trapped in there. And I was in there for 13 years, putting doors on Buicks. So if you have an Electra 225 or a LeSabre or a Chevy Impala, and the driver's door might have been put on by me. So I did that, disliked it extremely. I mean, and I finally quit after 13 years and started taking menial jobs. I was an apartment caretaker. I worked for the Census Department. I worked for Manpower. I did a million different things, and finally got a job in a little suburb of Detroit called Royal Oak, and worked at a place called ADP. And I was unloading trucks. And I wasn't a young man, Jason. I was, I think, 42 when I started doing this, and did that for a while. Had the chance to take a year off work, and to try to write a book. I was going to try to write a book during this time. While I was in the factory is when the birth of me as a writer, really, because I would write during breaks. And I found out that if I sat down and wrote, once I got into the story, it made the factory disappear for me. I'd be, when I was working for half an hour, I wouldn't think about the noise and the just the smoke and the monotony. I would think about what I was going to write. Then I'd go back and I'd write. And it was almost like I was playing with time. Like time would just become something different, because I'd sit down and it seemed like I'd be sitting for a second, and my partner would say, okay, you're up. And I'd have to get up and put my doors on. And that was the root, really. I think that, and the fact that my parents were both avid readers. My mother in particular, she would read a mystery novel every night. Every night. My father at the start of the week would buy 7 mystery novels, put them down. End of the week, she'd have them all done. she 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 would every night she would knock down 2 packs of cigarettes and 1 mystery novel. So and that was something. I think if you see somebody reading all the time, you start to say that, this is something that is important. And that was really, those are the shoulders that I'm standing on. After I wrote the novel, wrote The Watsons Go to Birmingham in 1963, which actually started out being called The Watsons Go to Florida in 1963. Wrote the novel, sent it in, entered some, this is at the University of Michigan. I was going to school nights, and there's an award in Ann Arbor. I was at the Flint branch, but the Ann Arbor branch had an award for MFA students and for seniors in the university. And I sent the Watsons Go to Florida in, and it won the contest. I to this day, I swear it won the contest. But then I look back at the program and it came in second. So I don't know. It's funny how your mind will play tricks on you. But so I thought I won the contest. That was enough. I started writing, became still working at the warehouse, unloading trucks. Then I got a phone call from a principal whose school was in the immediate area in Garden City, Michigan. And he said, "We heard you wrote a book and we'd like you to come speak to our students about it." And I said, "Sure." And he said, "We don't have much money to give you. We only got $300. I was making $250 a week. So I said, "Well, all right, I'll do it. I'll do it.
I can work with you.
I'll set some time aside and I'll do this." So that's really how I became a full-time writer. Was the school visit went so well. I love talking to kids. I just have a really good time. They have a good time. And then I started getting more and more calls, and I was able to quit, not from royalties from the Watsons Go to Birmingham, but from speaking engagements. So that was really the start. That's how I became a writer.
It's such a trip, though. I mean, I think about, mine, that the idea of time and using writing as a way to almost to teleport or to suspend time. And for me, I had a notebook at the clothing store I worked at. For Walter Dean Myers, he had a notebook in the stockroom of his department store. Walter Mosley had a notebook when he was a computer programmer. Mitch Jackson had a notebook in a prison cell, right? All of us using it as a way to sort of teleport us to a space that is less uncomfortable or less torturous in our everyday humdrum lives at the time. But let me ask you this. But I also know, when I think of my own life, I think of, like, before I got to that clothing store and that notebook, I already had a relationship with language. So because as a child, I loved poetry. I loved, so was there anything in your past that even gave you the gumption that writing might be it, besides Mom and the 2 packs, right? Like, it's like 20, your mom was blowing it down back in the day. So all the kids watching, this is a different time. But like, was there something, what was before you got there? Were you a language kid? Was it, what was it? Was it, because it's a lot to sit and say you're gonna write a book, man.
Yeah. And you're right. And what it was with me, I was in 3rd grade. I had, this is the importance of teachers, what teachers can do to lives. You have a teacher for 9 months. You see them 3 or 4 hours a day, 9 months, but they can have such an impact on you. And I had a 3rd grade teacher, Miss Henry, and she thought I had talent with writing. She kind of promoted me. She told me all this, and then she got me into this. There was a gifted program in the Flint schools at the time, and I used to have to, every Tuesday, I'd walk a mile or so to a white school in Flint, where this gifted program was based, and I'd go there and write and do other things. And this was, and my mother plays back in again with this, because one of the assignments we had was to write an article as if we were in Roman times, the early Roman times. And I brought it home and I worked on it and I wrote the article. And my mother read it and she told me, "I wish you hadn't brought this home. They'll think an adult wrote this." And that just kind of, that really set a spark inside of me. And I was a really good reader. Reading came very easily to me. And in the 6th grade, I was reading at a 12th grade level. I didn't like books though. I would read newspapers, I'd read Time magazine, I'd read Mad magazine, I'd read all kinds of things, but I wasn't a book person. That didn't really happen until I started working in the factory, and I'd pick up books and go in there. And before I started getting lost in the writing, I'd get lost in the reading. And I can remember one thing in particular that showed me the power of books. I was in algebra class, and I was at the back of the class, and the lesson was going on, and I had been reading the book Bridges of Tokori by James Michener. And I'm reading the book, and all of a sudden, then towards the end of the book, there's this big dramatic things that are happening, and I'm crying in algebra class about a book. And I thought, this is something else. And I subconsciously, I said to myself, I want to try this someday. And I think I buried that for the longest time. And it wasn't until I realized if I didn't do something, I'd be in the factory for the rest of my life, or I'd be mowing lawns or working as a garbage man the rest of my life. And Jason, those were very real possibilities. Kids say to me, if you weren't a writer, what would you be doing? I say, I'd be hauling garbage, or I'd be mowing your lawn, or knocking on your door in the wintertime saying, can I shovel your snow? Yeah. That's the way it was. Those were the stakes when I sat down and started to write.
It's a very real thing. There's to the right of me, there's a pair of jeans framed on my wall in my office. And those jeans are the jeans I wore for the 10 years I worked in that clothing store. And because if this didn't happen to me, I tell the kids all the time, if it weren't this, I'd still be in the store. Like there's like, I'd still be, we try to pretend like there's that like, gosh, I mean, the way that we romanticize our lives sometimes as like, oh yeah, don't worry, I would have figured it out, or not. I probably would have been selling. It's more likely that I would have continued to sell clothes for the next 20 years. That is the truth, right? That is a fact. And I'm so grateful that you also shared that story. I'm also really happy that you said that, like, yeah, I read a lot, but books weren't my jam. Because I think there are a lot of youngins in the audience who are forced to, who books are forced on them in school, and they're being evaluated by their ability and desire to read books. And that evaluation is then sort of attached to some strange value system. Yeah. And that value system then stops them from wanting to be whoever they really want to be, because now teachers and everybody else are saying, not teachers, but the system that is education is saying that this kid isn't meant to be this, this, and this, right? And reality is that kid could be Christopher Paul Curtis, right? Yeah. Like that, right? It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. But one thing I have to say about that is, from when I was a youngster, and then from when you were a youngster, things are a lot better now because of people like you. They don't have to force kids to read your books. They don't have to, say, you're going to read this book, which is what they had to do with me. They had to force me to read these books. Yes. And now I just finished judging the Society of Children Book Writers and Illustrators Golden Kite Award, which is an award for authors. And I was just really pleased and surprised at the number of books done by young Black men, young Black women, young Latinx people. There's just it's a much broader field right now. We got a long way to go, but we have made motion. I know from Walter Dean Myers to me, everything there's steps forward. Everything is going up and up and up. But one of the things that we have to be aware of is we can't get complacent with it, because it's real easy for everything to slip right back to the way it was without us paying attention.
It is. And I'm so glad you said that, because I think about it all the time. I think, I always tell the youngins that, you have the books now, like we have more, right? And we're trying to continue to produce more. Teachers and educators who love these children also have to make sure that the books are accessible, right? We need to make sure that they have access to the books, because even though they exist in the world, those books might not be in the school library or in the public library, depending upon where you live. And so we have to also make sure that the books are accessible to these youngins, so that they really can see themselves and bite down on a piece of literature that they feel like they can own. Let me ask you this. I love Watson's Go to Birmingham 1963. I love it for different reasons than other people. For me, the book speaks to the part of my own family dynamic as it pertains to the migration. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, we called it going home.
Yep.
You know, we had to go home in the summertime. I grew up here, right here in DC, but my mother grew up in South Carolina. And my family, the rest of our family was in South Carolina. And every summer we would have to go home. And so I guess I want to know what's the, now that we've gotten the origin story of the great Christopher Paul Curtis, what is the origin story of the Watsons? Because to me, it feels like at the time when I read it, mind you, I read it when I was an adult, right? I read that book when I was 25, right? Because I didn't have access, which is what I was saying, right? Even though you wrote it when I was in the 6th grade, it was published when I was in the 6th grade, and I didn't read it until I was 25 years old because I didn't know about it until I was 25 years old. And all I could think about as an adult is thinking this is the blackest thing I've ever read, right? When I think of cultural stuff, right? When I think of the way, like the brothers, and I think of Byron, and like I think of like knucklehead stuff, and like mischief and anger and all of this sort of thing. And then I think of like going home, right? And I guess I just want to know, like, what's your experience with that, or why tell this particular story? Where does it come from?
Oh, it all ties back to the factory again. Flint is a really unusual city in that even though it's dead north in the United States, it's a very southern city because during the right after the Depression and World War II, there was the migration, and there were whole cities from Arkansas, from South Carolina. People just moved up to Flint, to Detroit, to Chicago for the jobs. And Flint, like as I said, was a northern city, but it had a kind of a very southern flavor to it. And one of the things is in automobile factories, when the new model year comes out, there's something called changeover, and it's a month period where they have to rejigger all the tools in the factory to in the line and get everything set up for the new model cars. And I was always fascinated. My family was from the farthest we can go, and this is something that happens with African Americans. You go a certain way back, and then you're going to hit the wall of slavery, and it just kind of it ends. My family, we go back to Indiana, and then before that, that was the generation after slavery was Indiana. So we don't have much information beyond that. But from working in the factory, every changeover period, people who were from the South would go back home, go down home. And what they would do is they'd drive. They'd leave as soon as the line stopped on Friday. They were in the car. Their wife and kids were outside waiting for them, and they were headed south to Mississippi, to Alabama, to South Carolina. And they'd come back and they'd tell these stories of driving for 14 hours straight, 16 hours straight, 24 hours straight. There was a guy who lived in Texas, and he'd do 36 hours straight. And one of the things, as I was hearing this, I used to love to drive. And I said to myself, I'm going to drive to, my wife had family in Florida, Port St. Lucie, Florida. And I said to myself, I'm going to drive to Port St. Lucie, and I'm going to not stop. And this is really the origin of the Watsons Go to Birmingham too, because the family just takes this trip, and the father's has sprung the surprise on the mother that I'm not stopping. You can have all the notes you want. I'm not stopping. So I started driving, and I'm going and I'm going, and I'm exhausted, and I hit Florida, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm there. And then I look, and it's another 6 hours to get to Port St. Lucie. So I drove to Port St. Lucie, thinking I'd go to sleep. I'd sleep for 3 or 4. I couldn't close my eyes because every time I closed my eyes, I was behind that wheel. And that was the origin of the story. When I went to the public library after I had taken the year off work, I didn't know what I was going to write about. So I just kind of opened it up, and I thought the most interesting thing was this trip, this family going to Florida to take a bad kid back so grandma can straighten him out.
Exactly.
So that was the origin of the Watsons Go to Florida. Got the family to Florida. They met Grandma Sands. Nothing happened. So I set the book aside, and about a month later, I ran into the poem Ballad of Birmingham by Dudley Randall, a writer from Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
And it tells about the 16th Street church bombing. And one of the images that really grabbed me was the shoe of one of the little girls that had been killed. And so I used that. And that was really the origin of the story. But that was As I say, Florida's a very southern city in many ways. I think that's why it has that flavor, because this is one of the things that writing has done for me. It has expanded my horizons. Before I'd written the book, I was 42 years old. The farthest east I'd been, or the farthest west I'd been, was Chicago. The farthest south I'd been was Columbus, Ohio. So it was a whole awakening for me. And I'm grateful to writing for that, because now I travel. I used to travel extensively, and it's nice to be home for a while, but I'm ready to go back on the road.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
The walls are closing in.
It's rough, brother. It's rough. You know? What was the landscape like? So like the literary landscape at the time, because I think about you, like what at that time. So this is not. I came out in '95, right?
95, 94, 94, 95. I'm not sure.
Right. So what was it like in children's literature during that time? Like what was going on? Who else was out? Lori put out Speak came out '95, right? Lori Hartz Anderson Speak
Yes.
95. Walter, of course, was doing his thing. I think Monster is out '95.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
that's my book there. That's
all of our book, brother. Yeah. So what like give me like what was it like during that time? Your contemporaries, here you are, you've come onto the scene, you're like it explodes, it happens, all the things happen. Like what is that like for you? What how do you feel in this moment? You're Flint, Michigan kid, Flint, Michigan grown man, right? A
middle-aged man,
Flint, Michigan. What's going through your mind, man? What is there conversations around that? So two-pronged question. One, what does it feel like for you? And two, are the conversations that we're having now around diversity, were they happening then, or was it just kind of like we're just plugging along,
I don't think it was as organized as it is now. We were just plugging along. Everybody was doing the best that they could. It happened for me, 95. I'm trying to think of what the literary landscape was back then. But honestly, Jason, when I wrote The Watsons Go to Birmingham, I wasn't thinking of it as a children's book. I thought it was an adult book told from the point of view of a 10-year-old child. And I'm trying to... Billy Bathgate, a novel. Billy Bathgate was started out, and I think it was started out from the point of view of a 10-year-old child. And that's kind of the way that I wanted The Watsons to Go to Birmingham to go. And I entered it in contests, and it was finally accepted by Wendy Lamb, my editor. And but at that time, 95, I wasn't really aware of what was out there. Wendy Lamb said, this book is not a young adult book, it's a middle reader. And I can remember, I didn't say it to her, but I was thinking, I don't care what you call it, you publish it, I'll promote it. And so we went through the store. But and it sounds, to my kids, that's ancient history, 95. But it was a very different scene. There was a very different kind of vibe back then. And then once I got into children's literature and started reading, I was blown away at the quality of writing. I was like, I don't know if this has happened to you, but I've been asked, when am I going to write a real book and stop writing children's books? And and that's kind of the attitude I had. But then I started reading things and I thought, wow, this is something else. This is really, really good, really good. What I was reading at the time, I don't know, I think this came from my mother, the mysteries. I used to like to read mysteries, certain kinds of mysteries, very Black mysteries, very dark mysteries. Jim Thompson is an author whose books that I read a lot, and he wrote with humor, but about serious subjects. And I really like that.
Was Mosley writing at that time? Or he came? He
was when the book came out. Yeah, he was the man. He was the man.
Devil in a Blue Dress had like taken off, and
I think the movie might have been out by then. I can't remember, You'll see, Jason. You just hang in there, and the events are gonna start to blur, and you're gonna say,
Man,
"What was that? Was
I
that yesterday?"
listen, I can't wait till they celebrate a 25th anniversary of anything I made. I can't wait. You know what I mean? And there'll be somebody who came up on my books interviewing me, and I'll be like, man, this is amazing.
It
Christopher
is.
Paul
It,
Curtis.
it is amazing. It is amazing, and it's something that, when I was writing the book, I was hoping that somebody other than my mother and I would be the ones who buy the book. That's what I had no concept of what could become or what it would become. You dream, you have your dreams, you say, oh yeah, this is going to, but then something slaps you in the face and says, come on, let's be real here. And so, but yeah, the fact that it's 25 years, I don't know what happened. I don't know how 25 years got by so fast.
Hey,
So let's see, 10, 15 years from now, when your books have been out for 25 years, we're going to have to get together again. And,
yeah, we'll do it.
if my kids are nice to me, I'll be living with them. If not, I'll be in a nursing home somewhere.
That's
And
all right.
we can have an interview about that.
Yeah, I often it's got to be surreal, Like, do you look at? I mean, think about the landscape. And I know you're still working. I mean, you just put out a book. It was National Book Award finalist. Uh, did you win that year?
No,
No, you were finalist that year.
no, that was the first time I'd been nominated. I was. It's funny how certain awards seem to be geared towards certain people, and I'd never had any kind of recognition from the National Book Award. So that
Yeah,
was a pleasant surprise. That was nice. It was a very nice thing.
it's very
Yeah.
nice. Let me ask you let me ask you this, man. Here you are, 25 years later. The industry's changed. The world has changed in some ways and not changed in others. What do you think of the game as it is today? What are the things you think are really important and really exciting? And what are the things that I'm curious to know what troubles you in terms of our sort of industry, our thing as it stands today?
I think what troubles me is things have improved, but we're taking baby steps. We've got a long way to go. And it seems as though certain people things have gone well for certain people. But on the whole, it's not. As I said, I was reading all these books for the Golden Kite Award, and I was just blown away at the quality of them.
Yeah.
And that's very positive. My outlook has become more and more positive. And I think that what started this positive feeling in me is the Black Lives Movement. I am so impressed with that. I have always thought that there was a moment in American history that would never come back again, where there was courage shown by Black people, white people, working together to do something. And originally that was the Freedom Riders, where people would go from the North and from the South and go on buses and go and try to desegregate things like that. And to me, those people were so courageous and so strong, and were literally putting their lives on the line to try to make things better in this country.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen anything like that. It'd been nothing but backlash since that time. It was nothing but backlash. Langston Hughes' Backlash Blues, the poem was.
Absolutely.
I think about that all the time. What do you think I have to lose? And so as we went on, and I've lost track, Jason. Pull me back, Jason.
No, I was just saying, like, what excites you and what concerns you?
Oh yeah, and so what excites me now is the Black Lives Movement. When I started watching on TV the news, I used to be a news junkie, and then about 4.5 years ago, that ended. I just couldn't watch TV. There were certain voices I didn't want to hear, certain people I didn't want to see. But then I started watching again, and I saw something that I hadn't seen before. I saw demonstrations with just as many white people in the demonstration as Black people, supporting things for Black Lives Matter. And that to me, the fact that you have people willing to fight and to say, hey, we got to change this. Enough is enough.
Yeah.
I'm optimistic about that. Whether or not it pans out and it comes all the way through, I don't know. But I think, as I was saying, we take baby steps. We got to just keep taking steps. We just have to keep going forward.
My last question, man, is before we take questions, and if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and I'm going to get to them in just a second. My last question is going to be a selfish question, just because, and I never asked this question to, well, there's two very quick questions, and I want to ask. The first one is for you. The second one is going to be a selfish question that I want to know for me. Number one, if you could thank your 10, and I ask everyone this, if you could thank your 10-year-old self for something, right, or between 10 and 14, that age in which we write for, if you could thank that child for something, what would it be?
Wow. Good question. I thank him for being willing to take chances, I was a different kind of a kid when I was growing up, when I was kind of ostracized and I was by myself a lot. And I didn't try to fit in. And I want to thank young 10-year-old Christopher Curtis for fighting that fight, and for having hard times, but going through them, and for saying I might be different, but that doesn't make me bad. That means I'm different. And it's what I tell young people all the time about writing, that there is nobody in the world who would write a book the way that you would write it. Nobody, not even your twin brother or sister, has gone through the same things that you have gone through. So you've got a unique perspective, and I'd like to say thank you to 10-year-old Christopher for fighting through, and for having hard times, and always feeling like there was hope. And that part of it goes back again to my parents, and to my mother and father, and to teachers that I've had who let me know, okay, you can get through this, you can work your way through this. Great question, Jason. Great question. I've been asked every question in the world.
I know.
That's the first time I have been asked that.
And my last question, man, my selfish question, just for me, here I am, man. Christopher Curtis, here I am, born of your rib, brother. Here I am. What advice do you have for me, man? I'm working as hard as I can. I'm doing the best that I can. I had the blueprint, right? What advice would you have to keep me, to encourage me in this moment?
I go back to when the Watsons Go to Birmingham came out, or no, when Bud Not Buddy came out and won the Newbery. I'd spoken to a writer, Jerry Spinelli, Maniac McGee, and I asked him I said, you got any advice? And he told me, pay your taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's a
big one. Pay your taxes, have fun with your writing. And he said, protect your characters like they're gold. Those are your characters. You created them. People are going to try to jigger them this way and change them that way. It is your responsibility to protect them. Jason, I don't have any advice to give you. You are on such a path right now that obviously there's been a lot of forethought and planning going on. And it's not just something that's just happening. It's a result of what you've done. Stay strong. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. We need you. We need your voice.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. All right, we're going to take some questions. Here we go. Let's see. We read The Watsons Go to Birmingham 1963 with our 6th grade students each year. We read it with our students each year. Have you ever considered, here we go. Have you ever considered writing a sequel to the novel? And how do you manage, are these two different questions? These are two different questions. So have you ever considered making a sequel? The Watsons Go to Birmingham 1964. Have you ever thought about it?
My editor's husband, there's certain people that I'm around, I have to have a puffer because I'm laughing so hard I think I'm going to choke. He's one of them. He suggested that I do a series of books about the Watsons, with the Watsons go to Chernobyl, the Watsons go to Nagasaki, just all these things that the people see the Watsons car pull up and the whole town just evacuates. But I've thought about it, but it's hard to do, and especially with something that I was written 25 years ago. I'm not the same person I was 25 years ago. I don't know if I could do the characters justice. My editor Wendy and I have talked about this. And one of the things that she had stressed was that the book has to be better than the original if you're going to do that. And I don't have the drive to do that right now. So as far as a sequel, no, there might be spin-offs eventually, but I don't think I could ever do a sequel. And this is another thing I tell young people, that one of the beauties of writing is, because some of the time kids will ask me, what happened to Kenny after this? And I tell them, the beauty of writing is that your contribution to the story is just as important as the author's. Whatever you think happened is what happened, because you're putting your own thing into the story. That's why a movie is never as good as the book, because in the book, you're providing how people sound, how they look. And in the movie, somebody's already done that for you, and it just doesn't match up to what you have. So no sequel for the Watsons.
I'm happy to hear that personally. Everybody always asks for a sequel, but nobody really wants a sequel.
No, they don't. Yeah.
Sequel's never as good, right? All right, how do you manage this is a good question. How do you manage the very delicate balance between laugh out loud humor and these breathtaking tragic events?
I think that humor and tragedy are just like this. They're tied together. One of the things with the internet is now the moment something tragic happens, there are some jokes that you can dig up that are hilarious. I mean, they're totally inappropriate and it's way too soon, but I don't understand how people's minds work like that. I think that humor, and in my case, humor is a buffer. Humor is something that keeps the tragedy at distance, that you're looking at it, you're not so involved in it that you can't see all the other things that are going on around it. You can still see that there is something humorous in there, and it's something that, as far as I can see, or as far as I could write, that's the only way I could write about something serious, was if there was humor to it. And they're right. Whoever asked the question is right. There is a balance. You have to, you can't make it silly. You can't make it slapstick. It's got to be tied in with that, and it's got to flavor the story. It's got to be and it's a spice that goes into the story.
Yeah, I think some of that stuff, and I always am careful about making everything contextualized by culture. But I do know, but because I only know my own culture, I do know that that has been a survival mechanism for so many years. It's
exactly.
You go to a Black funeral and it's sad, and
yeah,
it'd be funny.
It's funny you say that. My wife is from Somalia, and she was telling me about the Somali funerals. And Jason, we got to find out where a Somali funeral is and go see it, because the way she says, instead of mourning the person, they dog the person out. I borrowed money from me in 1987.
Yes.
You never paid me back. You never brushed your teeth, and it goes on and on like
it's a roast.
It's a roast. A post-mortem roast.
Right. That sounds amazing to me personally. All right. What advice do you have for young writers who may be wanting to write about this current experience of the pandemic and or racial injustice now?
The advice I give to all young writers, to all writers, number one, as a writer, you're very powerful. Excuse me? Pay your taxes. Yeah. That's a big one. Number one, as a writer, you're a powerful person. Have fun with that. You can create things, you can destroy things, you can create people, you can destroy people. Have fun with it. It's a fun thing. Let it go. Number two, be patient with your writing. It's never going to go the way you want it. Jason doesn't sit down and write these beautiful poems and these beautiful stories. He goes back at them again and again and again. And still, if you ask him right now, I'm sure he'd tell you there are things that he'd change. There are a lot of things that he would change. Number three, write every day. Writing is like anything else that you do. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And you will improve incrementally. So write every day and make it a habit. And number four, ignore all rules. Because what we really want to hear is your voice and your perspective on something. They say, know your audience. You don't have to know your audience. I write to myself. That's who I write to. I don't think about my audience. I write to myself, and then I craft it to be a book for younger people after I'm done with it. So that would be my advice to writers. Most importantly, write every day, I think. Keep a notebook. It's no coincidence that so many of these writers that you cited had notebooks. And that's what I had in the factory. Yep. I had notebooks. I'd write notebooks. And it's a good thing because it's not the same as a computer where it can be erased, whatever. You can go back and you can kind of do a post-mortem on how the story developed. You can say, okay, this happened here. Why did I do that? And then you can go back and look and do it that way.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add is if you want to write about the pandemic and racial injustice, all I would say is everything that Christopher said. And also, sometimes it's best to give yourself a little space when it comes to the moments of trauma.
Exactly. Yeah.
You'll be able to see it clearer when you're on the other side of it.
Exactly. Exactly. That's I had started to do a book about the water crisis in Flint. Couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it. It was so tragic and so heavy that I couldn't find a way. That doesn't mean I won't be able to find a way. I know that you set something aside and your brain is wonderful. It's working on things when you don't even know it's working on it. But I couldn't find a way. And I'd interviewed a woman who had twin boys in Flint, identical twin boys, who up to age 5, they were the same size. And then after the water crisis, one of them was 6 inches taller than the other one. And that just broke my heart, because I know if I had stayed in Flint, this would have been my kids that had that. And it was too close. And you're right, you have to move back and let it go.
Yeah.
And then look at it from a distance.
Yeah. What advice do you have for elementary school English teachers on how they can introduce books and topics that might contain intense or complex subject matter without it being too traumatic for young readers?
This is the advantage of librarians. Librarians are great people. They have great knowledge. Many of them have great knowledge, and they can direct people to the appropriate book. I always feel so inadequate when teachers ask me for advice, because I think teaching is probably the most important profession that there is.
Absolutely.
You're unappreciated, you're underpaid, but you go and you do your thing every day. My sister, as I was telling you before, was an English teacher in Bowie, Maryland, for 9 years. And it was a rough, tough job, but she went and did it every day. So as a writer, all I can do is say, talk to a librarian, go by the books that talk to the kids. They'll let you know what they like. And the good thing about now is, if you just scratch the surface a little bit, there are books out there that they can relate to and that will grab them. And that's a beautiful thing. I think that when a teacher tells me that their students really like the book, to me, that is kind of, that's right up there with what you had said earlier, Jason, about, my ribs.
Yeah.
and you, it's the same kind of a compliment.
Yeah, man. And the other thing, because first of all, he's absolutely, there are books, there are so many more books now. I mean, about everything at this point, But the other thing is, the beauty of teaching the little kids is that teaching them kindness and fairness is the work. Right, like that is the work, right? So we could teach them, like, it's basically reverse engineering. So like we could teach them the history of racism, which they were going to learn at some point.
Yeah.
Or we could teach them how to combat it, right? By teaching them kindness and fairness and equity as a 5-year-old. We can teach all that at 5, right?
Yeah.
So that when the ideas of racism come in the 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th grade, they'll know immediately why it's wrong, why it's a problem, why it's an issue, and why it's absurd, because all they know is fairness, kindness, right? Humanism basically is what they know. And I think we shouldn't undervalue those simple core things just because we want to put details on top of it so that our young people have language. Yes, language is important, but also integrity is important, right? Language can be learned, integrity is much harder to teach.
Beautiful.
Mr. Curtis, if you were to rewrite The Watsons Go to Birmingham 2021, would you change anything, or would you keep anything the same? That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's if you'd asked me that up to 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said, no, that's a snapshot of a time that I took at that time. I'm not the same author. But one of the things that changed my mind is I was in a class with fifth graders, and I was reading. And when I read, you have a go-to chapter that you read. I always read the first chapter. It's got humor in it. It introduces the family. So I started reading the first chapter, and a little girl raised her hand and said, Mr. Curtis, could you read the 5th chapter, please, instead? Or what, I can't remember what chapter it was. And I said, okay, sure, why not? And I started to read it. And you know how you haven't practiced, and I'm fumbling along and all. And then I get to the point where Byron, who is a semi-juvenile delinquent thug wannabe, Kenny wants to start swearing with him. He wants to have a swear fest with him. And so Byron uses the A word. And I'm reading this along, and I've forgotten all about that. And I'm reading, and I get to the point where Byron says, you can kiss. And I'm looking at this, and I look up at these kids, and I'm thinking, I put teachers in a position where they're going to have to somehow or other work around this. And I thought,
or you put them in the position to be the coolest teacher in the school. One or the other.
Yeah. And it might be the coolest former teacher in the school. You never know. So what I did in the 25th anniversary is different. Is there were a few places that I thought, okay, if I couldn't do it, and I'm reading this, and I get to the point, and I'm stumbling around, and the little girl says to me, go ahead and say it, Mr. Curtis. We know what the word is already. And I thought, okay. So I changed that. I changed some of the language, minor changes, and I don't think anybody would have noticed if I hadn't said anything about it. But other than that, I go back to my answer. That was a story that was written by 42-year-old Christopher Curtis. He's long gone. There's a different guy here now. He's still writing. He's a better writer now, but I couldn't write that. That was a special time. And I might be able to write something, but I wouldn't be able to write that. So I leave it alone, and it is what it is, and that's it.
Can I ask you something? Would you ever write Byron's story as an adult?
I've never thought about that. No. I've been working on an adult novel for about 40 years. Takes place in the factory. And it'll be a really interesting story when I'm done with it, because the factory was a whole different world. It was just a world unto itself. People lived in the factory. They pretend they punched out, and then they walk and they turn left instead of turning right, and they go down in the basement. And there was a guy who lived in the factory for something like 6 years before they caught him. You could buy alcohol at the tool crib. There were all kinds. It was just a world unto itself. Fascinating. And I'd like to write about that someday. But I don't know. I'm attracted and drawn to writing from about a 10-year-old perspective. And I'm sure there's some deep-seated psychological reason for that. Maybe I don't want to know what it is, but that's where I seem to be. And to write as Byron as an adult. And it's funny you ask that, because Byron is of all the characters I've written, Byron's my favorite character. Yeah. But I don't think I could.
Let me tell you, man, one time I was at a school out in Ohio, kid, maybe 6th grader, comes to me, he says, yo, I read all your books. How come all the middle grade books specifically, how come like it's always issues with the father? Now, I had never thought about it. I had never thought about it. It never crossed my mind, but this kid had read all the books, everything that was middle reader. And he was like, yo, like the father, what's up? Every book, like, and I realized that that's because that was the age that things went south with my parents, my father and I. Everything happened in that age range where my world fell apart, my world exploded. And so there's probably something there,
and you know what? You know what the reason that is because you're a good writer. And writing is, I knew this after the second book came out. Writing is exposing yourself. You're making yourself vulnerable, and you're making yourself exposed. And I knew if I kept writing books, there are going to be some perceptive people who say, this guy's got this problem and that problem, but you just have to overcome it. But it's interesting how a lot of things that other people can point out from your reading. So if you want to be a writer, get ready, because someone's going to psychoanalyze you.
That's for sure.
And they're going to hit the nail on the head too. So
you told them all your business. Yeah.
If you're a good writer, if you're a good writer.
Wendy Lamb is here. Wendy Lamb is in the building. And she said something that she's not in the actual questions, but she said, Paul M wants you to write. I'm guessing you know what that means. She in here, so I figured I should respect it.
Paul M is a Pulitzer Prize winning composer. And when I told you about people that I have to have a puffer around, Paul M is one of them. I have to have a puffer because I think there are two different kinds of comedic minds. I think there's one that can do a long range. It's like a marathon. And then there are people who are sprinters. And I think it's the sprinters, the people whose minds are really quick like that and can see the humor in something right away and know how to frame it and bring it out. So tell Wendy Lamb to tell Paul M, I am Paul. I'm writing.
All right. This person said, we got time for two more. This person says, I am fascinated by Grandma Sands, and my students and I like to debate the possible symbolic significance of her name. Is there such significance, or is that just a happy accident?
No. Grandma Sands' name was done for a very specific reason. I love Bill Withers. Bill Withers, to me, songwriters are authors, they're poets. Bill Withers, I think, is just was one of the most beautiful writers that there was. And he did a song called Grandma's Hands. Grandma's Hands. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna write this, I'm gonna name her, instead of Grandma's Hands, Grandma Sands, which sounds exactly the same. Yeah. So I did that. And there were supposed to be tie-ins that came in later that would, tie it back to Bill Withers. But for some reason, I never developed those. But that's where Grandma Sands got her name.
Great Bill Withers. Man, that makes me so happy to hear. That's awesome. That's a good Easter egg. All right, let's see. Okay, this is good. How do you know when you have found the perfect storyline?
You never know. I don't think you ever know. I think that you do the best that you can with it. And I don't know if this happens with you, but with me, I'll write something and I'll think, wow, this is really good. And then I'll come back 10 minutes later and I'm embarrassed by what I've written. It seems so bad. But that's the thing with writing. And I think one of the skills that you develop as you advance as a writer is the ability to just be willing to let it go, to trust yourself enough that it is good, that the feelings that you had at one time where you thought it was good, you have to have faith in those, that the doubts creep in later, and the doubts can destroy you, but you have to be able to just keep going and to stick with what you have faith in yourself, I think is what I'm trying to say. Know that you can do it and what you're writing and go from there.
Absolutely. Last question from me. True or false, Justments is the best Bill Withers album?
Justments. I think that's the one that's got.
That's the one. That's the one.
What Paint Your Pretty Picture with a Song? No, is that on there?
That's the one with what's the Smile joint? That's the one. That's also the one with the one about the stories.
It's not ringing any bells.
Who has the perfect story? Everyone has a story. Everyone has a story that they're trying to sell. Tell them how we get to heaven and how we've been through hell. You never heard? Come on.
No. I've got.
Come on, man.
You know what? I at one time I had 4,000 record albums and had them. Tragedy. This is a tragedy alert. Had them in the basement. Flood wiped out half of them. The insurance company came, took the other half that were up high, set them on a table. It flooded again and got all those. So that was, I can see the Justments.
It's got
album.
It's like green and red. It's like a rich green and red color.
Right. And I think it's at a chalkboard or something.
Yeah, he's at a chalkboard, exactly.
Yeah. But all his, I think his first one I think is my favorite. And when you go back and listen to the songs, they're 2 minutes, they're 2.5 minute songs, but they're beautiful. And he was such a humble man. There's that a documentary and I didn't know he was a stutterer. And when he goes back to a school in New York for people who have stutters, and it just breaks your heart. But anything by Bill Withers, I think, is
the greatest. And you know, he serviced toilets. That's what he did before he became a musician. He serviced toilets.
Wow.
And he became a musician in his 30s. He like stumbled into it in his 30s. Look, if nothing more we learned today, we learned that, you know, there ain't no right or wrong way to do this.
That's right.
You know, and that we all find ourselves where we are when we find ourselves. You know, when we find ourselves, we then find ourselves where we are. You know, which is an interesting
Find your path and stick with it and have confidence in yourself. And the good thing about writing and reading is that if you don't become a professional, you have learned something. You develop a mighty skill. If you learn how to dribble a basketball, become great at that, you know, you got these things called knees and ankles. They can go just like that. And then what do? Nobody's going to pay to watch you just stand on the corner dribbling a basketball. But as a writer, you can get a job. You can take care of yourself and you can take care of your family.
Congratulations on 25 years, man.
Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And please, when your 25th comes up, please invite me to.
I'm gonna call you. It's gonna be me and you again. Thank y'all so much.
Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I can tell that, you know, this hour went by fast. We probably could have hung with you guys for quite a bit. For the students in the audience, we did put in a link to YouTube because I'm sure y'all have no idea who Bill Withers is. So go get yourself educated. Somebody put in the chat about it was on the B side of the 45 of Lean On Me. These kids don't know what a 45 is, y'all. This has been absolutely fun. We're going to have the two of you back. We can't wait until things get to a place where we can have the two of you at the museum and tell this story. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this one comment that was placed in the Q&A. Mrs. Hess's class apparently loves reading The Watsons Go to Birmingham so much that they refuse to do math because they want to know what happens in the next chapter. So, Mrs. Hess's class, as someone who understands the urge to continue to write, the characters aren't going anywhere. This isn't like TV. They're in the book. They are still there. They will be there after math class. Please go to math class for Mrs. Hess's class or for anybody's class, you know, when you do that. We love that you guys are reading. We love that you're passionate about reading. The National Civil Rights Museum, we are so pleased to know that to offer you guys a unique thing that we have autographed copies of the book for sale. And guess what? It's just $8.99 and you get an autographed copy of the 25th anniversary edition with the special essays in it. There are so many more stories and ways that people have thought about this work and what they do. We encourage all of you to continue to do the great work that you're doing. Continue to read. Thank you so much for the students and teachers who participated. Thank you again, Sir Christopher. And Jason, my fellow DC native, and everyone else, stay tuned. Visit the National Civil Rights Museum's website, civilrightsmuseum.org, or follow us on social media at NCR Museum for all of our latest events and programs. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it. Great job.
Our pleasure, brother. Soon.